Greetings, people who are obviously music theory gluttons for punishment. In my previous new chord symbol videos, I failed to mention a few key points, and I want to mention them now before I move on to my next chord videos. I talked about how the prominent intervals were discovered, like the perfect intervals, the major intervals, and I talked about them a little bit. And I talked about how those intervals are naturally or inherently part of the harmonic series. Now, some people call it the overtone series because you have your fundamental, and the tones that occur over and above the fundamental, in other words, the tones that occur higher in pitch over the fundamental, can be called overtones, but I kind of like to call them partials. But either way, it's the same thing. So I tried to talk about how the intervals that we use today in modern times are found inherently in the harmonic series. And I used the fundamental tone C2 just as an example, but you can use any tone. So I wanted to mention that. Now, what happened was, in the late 800s, we're told in history books, somebody decided to sing a line, a prominent melodic line, excuse me, called the principal line. One or more people would sing the principal line, right? Then they decided that someone else would sing a line, a perfect fourth below that principal line, or a perfect fifth below that principal line, or a perfect eighth, or an octave below that principal line. You see, you have the principal, your prominent melodic line, and you have somebody singing a fourth below, perfect fifth below, or an octave below. And those lines were called organ lines. And that's why the system was called organum or organum. Now, in Latin and Greek, organ basically means instrument. So the voice was considered an instrument, actually one of the first instruments. So you had your principal line being sung, and you had your organ lines. But they liked and they kept the interval of a perfect fourth and perfect fifth below that principal, and the perfect octave, or excuse me, the octave, perfect eighth, because they were using intuition or common sense or whatever. They were not scientifically or consciously aware of this yet. Okay, so I failed to make that clear in the previous video. Then, history books tell us in the early 1100s, thirds were used because somebody decided that, you know what, these thirds are no longer considered dissonant. They're no longer considered gnarly or unpleasant or scratchy, whatever. So thirds were kept and accepted. So now you need to hold that thought because that's very important, and I forgot to mention that in the previous video. Then in the 1300s, a guy named Nicole Oresme, I guess that's how you pronounce it, he proved the harmonic series scientifically. He mapped it out, but the written records, the actual documents were lost, completely lost. But other people in his time, acquaintances and associates, etc., they knew that he did this, but they couldn't find the written proof. It was gone. But at least he worked on it. Then in the 1500s, or early 1600s, this guy, Marin Mersenne, or Mersenne, he was a French polymath. That means he knew a lot about almost everything. He came along and he proposed a 12-tone equal temperament scale. Now, he wasn't the first to do this, but he was the first to get people to take it seriously. So later on, he was referred to as the father of acoustics. But he proposed a 12-tone equal temperament scale. Now, I say that because that's the one I showed in the earlier videos, with your 12 tones, either ascending in pitch or descending in pitch. I showed that. But this is what he was suggesting. He was proposing this, which is actually what we use nowadays. And he was saying, let's have a scale with increments, scientific increments, in other words, a graduation system, so that the space between each tone, all right, would be equal temperament. In other words, you're taken from your C4 to your C5. You're making equal increments here. So that's what he suggested. Then later on in the 1600s, a guy named Pietro Mengoli, an Italian, right? And then the Swiss Bernoulli brothers, I guess that's how you pronounce it, all right? They proved and documented the harmonic series. So now these guys, respectively, in their own countries, were saying, okay, here's this thing, and it's a real thing. We approved it, we documented it, and now we're good to go. All right? But it wasn't till long time later, around 1822, that Joseph Fourier, he was a French mathematician and physicist, he not only worked out the harmonic series from the musical standpoint, but from the scientific, scholarly standpoint, the physics standpoint, and now the harmonic series was ensconced. In other words, it was established, it was taken seriously, and it was a permanent thing, and eventually people realized, oh my, over the hundreds and hundreds of years, we've been choosing intervals through intuition or common sense, in other words, or based orally on the ears, what sounds good. We've been doing this, and all along in nature, and all the while, over the hundreds of years, we didn't know there was this thing, this harmonic series thing, this overtone series thing, and that's how we've been fashioning our intervals. And now we see that nature is predisposing us to want to hear things in a certain way. Because what I failed to mention in my previous videos was, if you look at the harmonic series with the C2 as the fundamental, you see that your intervals from C4 basically up to C5 are the major intervals, are the thirds. Now that's very important. I forgot to say this, because when I show you how we build chords and how I do it my way, you see that our basic harmonic, our chord system, the chord structure is pretty much based on the intervals that we find in the harmonic series very early on here in this first octave. Because why? Our chords are built on thirds, and I'm going to talk about this. I can't wait to get into that part. Our chords are built on thirds. Now in the harmonic series, you see from C5 on up, and I only have a partial chart here, that we get into the intervals called the seconds. And they are very important, very critical, because in the Western world, in Western music theory, our scales are built on seconds, whether it be a minor second, a major second, or an augmented second. You'll see that our scales in Western theory are built basically on seconds. So you see the harmonic series provides your perfect octave, fifth, fourth. Then it provides the thirds, the structure of the thirds for your chord building, pretty much your vertical harmonic structure thing. Then it provides up here, higher up, it provides your intervals of seconds so that you can make scales, all kinds of great scales. And I forgot to mention that, and I just wanted to say that, and that's it. I want to get into the actual chord building, and I want to discuss the way I do it and show you whether or not anybody in Western music theory missed anything, because that's what I do. I look for things that people missed. And so you see here, just quickly, the tones that occur in the harmonic or overtone series that occur naturally, they were, scholars took them and they were displaced, they were moved, and they were compressed, and they were brought down in here, basically, let's say within, let's say C3 and C5, and used all the time, because that's pretty much where our tones occur when we listen to popular music, regular music. They ordinarily occur in here between C3 and C5, and then your your alto and tenor range occurs right in there. So all these intervals, the basic essence of the intervals, was displaced and compressed into an area where we can use them nicely and get some really nice stuff, get some really nice songs. So I failed to mention that, and that's it. So I hope to see you soon, and we'll talk about building chords. Thank you for being patient, and good night.